During the 2nd century, a young physician arrived at a fortress prison in the year 159. He observed men destined to die, consuming the cheapest feed available, yet their bones grew stronger than those of modern athletes. The daily meal responsible for this bone density is item 4 on this list. Item 3 is a mixture that a New York restaurant currently sells for a premium price. Item 11 exposes the ineffectiveness of the billion-dollar sports supplement industry. Item 1 was a bodily product sold directly to the audience while it was still warm. These 25 meals were engineered for a single purpose: survival within a system designed to crush human beings. Number 25 is libum. Before entering the arena, during the public feast known as the Cena Libera, fighters received a small, sweet cake. The cooks mixed fresh cheese with flour and an egg, shaped it into a mound, placed it on a bed of bay leaves, and baked it. They then poured a heavy drizzle of honey over the warm crust to soak in. The Roman statesman Cato the Elder recorded this exact recipe as a religious offering to the gods. For an enslaved fighter, consuming this was a grim communion. The gladiator was sharing food with the divine, making a final offering before facing death. Number 24 is dulcia domestica. Even inside a fortress prison, fighters possessed a biological craving for sugar to break the endless monotony of beans and barley. Cook sliced dates open, removed the pits, stuffed them tight with walnuts, pine nuts, and black pepper, and fried them in heavy honey. This was a rare indulgence, providing a fleeting taste of the provisions free Romans enjoyed beyond the arena walls. Today, grocers at Whole Foods sell these exact stuffed dates in cardboard boxes as medjool date bites for $8. 2,000 years ago, this candy recipe was fed to slaves who would likely die in their 20s. Number 23 is Roman cabbage. When a gladiator's flesh was torn and muscles ached from wooden training swords, the trainers relied on brassica. They boiled it down or served it raw in the dim light of the barracks, utilizing cabbage as both a vegetable and a medical treatment. Following the writings of Cato, Roman physicians documented cabbage as a broad-spectrum remedy. They recorded that it aided digestion and accelerated recovery for battered bodies. The trainers did not serve it for its flavor. It functioned purely as a prescription for survival. Number 22 is moridum. To make the flavorless, glue-like daily porridge edible, the poorest Romans required extreme pungency. They threw hard cheese into a mortar, added handfuls of raw garlic, celery leaf, rue, and coriander, and pounded the mixture together with a splash of vinegar and olive oil until it formed a thick paste. If a gladiator ever received cheese, it appeared in this aggressive form. The sharp paste delivered just enough flavor to break the crushing, gray repetition of institutional feed. Number 21 is alec. The Romans developed umami 2 millennia before the term existed by fermenting fish intestines in the sun for weeks to create garum. The highest grade Spanish garum cost the equivalent of a legionary's entire annual salary. Gladiators did not receive the high-grade liquid. They received alec, the bottom-tier paste, consisting of the leftover dregs scraped from the bottom of the fermentation barrel after the clear, amber liquid was siphoned off for wealthy citizens. The cooks dumped a spoonful of this fermented fish sludge into the gladiators' daily porridge. Today, artisanal Italian Colatura di Alici, the direct descendant of garum, sells for up to $30 a bottle in American specialty shops. The gladiators recognized it simply as the scrapings of the barrel. Number 20 is dried fruit rations. In the graffiti of Pompeii, citizens celebrated successful fighters as sex symbols, and children played at being gladiators. Inside the cell-like sleeping quarters of the fortress prisons, however, those same heroes sat in silence, chewing on dried figs, dates, and raisins. The trainers handed out this standard supplementary food because it was cheap, calorie-dense, and possessed a long shelf life. For a man subsisting on a monotonous diet engineered for maximum caloric efficiency, this fruit provided a rapid energy source. It was also one of the few items that carried an appealing flavor, offering a tiny burst of sweetness in a shockingly short life. Number 19 is lentil pottage. Fighters were valuable economic assets to their trainers, known as lanistae. The lanistae needed their fighters to rebuild torn muscle, but protein from animal sources remained an extreme luxury. The solution was a slow-cooked legume stew consisting of lentils, water, and olive oil. Lentils functioned as a staple legume throughout the Roman world, perfectly suited for institutional feeding and the lower classes. Isotopic analysis of bones from the Ephesus gladiator cemetery confirmed this heavy reliance on legumes. A gladiator scraped every last drop of the pottage from a clay bowl on a wooden table, relying on it to provide the essential amino acids required to stand in the arena the following day. Number 18 is raw onions and garlic. Combat on the arena sand demanded physical strength, and across the ancient Mediterranean, populations heavily associated garlic with vitality. Gladiators consumed it raw or used it to aggressively flavor their mashes. Cato the Elder specifically listed onions and garlic as essential flavoring ingredients in his foundational recipes. The smell of garlic simmering in olive oil masked the blandness of their daily feed. This application was not a culinary art, but a functional, calculated attempt to inject strength and medicinal properties into men who were legally stripped of their civic rights. Number 17 is olive oil. Because meat was incredibly rare, the fighters obtained their essential fats from the olive press. Olive oil served as the primary fat source in the Mediterranean diet. Cooks poured it over grains and legumes, providing the heavy calories required to fuel a fighting slave. Attendants also rubbed it externally into the gladiator's skin for massage and bathing, soothing muscles battered by the scrape of wooden training sword. In a world defined by grueling institutional confinement, olive oil was one of the only familiar elements connecting a gladiator's food to the broader culinary traditions of free Romans. Number 16 is pasca. This beverage consisted of water, vinegar, and occasionally a handful of herb. The Romans diluted low-quality wine or vinegar with water to create this acidic drink. It served as the standard beverage of soldiers and the lower classes, and gladiators almost certainly consumed it daily. The mixture provided basic hydration alongside mild antimicrobial properties. This is the exact liquid offered to Jesus of Nazareth during his crucifixion. For 2,000 years, historical narratives have framed that act as a profound cruelty, but it was an act of normalcy. Pasca was the standard everyday beverage of common Romans, sustaining both gladiators and soldiers. Today, patrons walk into American bars and pay $12 for a drinking vinegar or a shrub cocktail. The Romans called it pasca, and they gave it to slaves. The entertainment industry has distorted the physical reality of the arena. When an American blockbuster depicts gladiators stepping into the Colosseum, the actors portray ripped, lean warriors with minimal body fat. Hollywood spent decades projecting this modernized athletic fiction. The historical truth reveals that the trainers deliberately fattened the ancient world's most famous fighters. The physician Galen, who worked directly in the gladiator schools treating their torn bodies, recorded that their daily diet made their flesh flabby. This physical condition was not a nutritional mistake, it was a calculated biological strategy. That thick layer of subcutaneous fat served as natural armor. Modern researchers confirm that a fat cushion protects the body from shallow blade cuts and shields vital nerves and blood vessels during a fight to the death. The fighters did not resemble fitness models on movie posters. Their physical builds were much closer to those of sumo wrestlers. Number 15 is vinegar-seasoned dishes. Wine belonged to the citizens, while vinegar went to the property. Because wine was far too expensive for institutional feeding, the trainers utilized acidum, the cheapest wine vinegar available. The cooks aggressively poured it into the daily mashes for both flavor and preservation. This practice reflected the cold arithmetic of survival. Vinegar acted as the poor man's wine, delivering a harsh, acidic bite that made terrible, monotonous food bearable. Number 14 is the barley honey energy drink. Inside a fortress prison, equipped with heated floors and a single exit door facing the arena, food remained purely functional. Occasionally, however, the gladiators received sweetened barley water. Honey operated as the primary sweetener in the Roman world. By steeping barley in water, straining the liquid, and adding a heavy pour of honey, the trainers formulated a calorie-dense recovery drink. It stood as one of the few actual treats in their diet, offering a momentary taste of sweetness against a backdrop of endless, gray porridge. Number 13 is sprouted barley gruel. Long before the modern wellness industry documented the nutritional benefits of germinated grains, the Romans utilized them to feed their cheapest assets. The cooks sprouted hard barley grain, transforming it into a dense, easy-to-digest paste rich in nutrient. This was a standard method for producing cheap, highly digestible food. Today, Grocery stores market sprouted grain products as premium health food at a massive markup. For the men in the training school, or ludi, it simply represented the most efficient caloric method to keep a fighting slave alive. Number 12 is fava bean mash, known as fabe fresse. The cooks smashed fava beans together with peeled barley and water, forming a thick, heavy paste. The physician Galen documented this specific mixture as a primary gladiator food. He criticized the mash for making the fighters overly fleshy, but the fighters possessed absolutely no control over their ration. Today, modern Mediterranean restaurants menu this exact dish as a heritage legume puree for $16 a plate. The gladiators consumed it from clay bowls solely because they were institutionalized property. Number 11 is pulse, the gladiator barley porridge. Cooks boiled barley, fava beans, onion, garlic, and oil for hours until the ingredients fused into a thick, unyielding mash. The gladiators consumed this exact meal every single day. The Romans recognized the dietary reliance, prompting Pliny the Elder to record their nickname, hordearii, translating to the barley men. Within the Roman army, commanders issued barley rations instead of wheat as a severe disciplinary punishment for soldiers. For gladiators, this punishment grain served as their foundational food. Today, the modern restaurant industry rebrands this exact meal as an ancient grain bowl, selling it for $14 at cafes in Brooklyn. The gladiator simply recognized it as the animal feed required to maintain his heartbeat. Modern observers might look at this repetitive, meatless diet and assume these men were malnourished and slowly starving inside their fortress prisons. However, scientists analyzed the skeletal remains from a gladiator cemetery in Ephesus, Turkey, in the year 2014. Their findings completely revised historical assumptions. The strontium levels in the gladiator bones measured twice as high as those of ordinary citizens, proving their heavy plant-based diet was brutally effective. Furthermore, their calcium levels registered at exorbitant metrics. The Roman physicians prescribing this seemingly pathetic food, including Galen, were not cutting corners or making physiological errors. They operated as advanced sports scientists 2 millennia before the era of whey protein and isolated dietary supplement. They understood precisely how to build a human frame capable of surviving a slaughter. Number 10 is barley water. Before advancing to the final feast, the diet utilized pitiasane. The cooks soaked barley in water, strained off the cloudy liquid, and issued it to the fighters as a daily beverage. It provided nothing more than basic hydration paired with a minimal caloric payload. The institution stripped even their beverages of enjoyment, engineering every liquid intake purely for biological function. Number 9 is salted fish. The night before combat, the arena hosted the Cena Libera, a public feast for the condemned. Men who had survived for months on vegetarian mashes were suddenly handed salsamentum, fish preserved in heavy salt and brine. Fish preservation operated as a massive industry across the empire, yet animal protein remained an extreme luxury for a gladiator. The trainers only authorized the distribution of meat when death was imminent. Number 8 is fresh figs and fruits. For every other day of their institutionalized existence, the fighters chewed on dried ration. During the Last Supper, the attendants handed them fresh figs, apples, and grapes. The biological difference was minor, consisting only of the presence of water and soft flesh inside the fruit. Yet this contrast carried enormous psychological weight for men confined to a fortress prison. The fresh fruit served as a tactile reminder of the vibrant, living world they had been removed from. Number 7 is fine wheat bread. To a Roman citizen, the difference between barley and wheat was not a matter of flavor, but a rigid marker of social class. Gladiators ate barley, which was the grain allocated for animals. At the Cena Libera, however, the attendants handed them panis, a soft white bread baked in one of Rome's 300 professional ovens. Today, an artisanal barley loaf costs more than wheat bread at the modern bakery. In Rome, holding a piece of white wheat bread provided a brief, heartbreaking taste of a free man's existence. It represented a temporary elevation in status for men who had been legally stripped of all civic rights. Number 6 is spiced wine, known as conditum paradoxum. The cook slowly heated the wine alongside honey, black pepper, saffron, mastic, and date. For enslaved fighters who normally survived on cheap vinegar water, tasting heavy, spiced wine constituted an extraordinary indulgence. Society normally reserved this specific drink for wealthier citizens. Serving it to the gladiators acted as a gesture of respect, while simultaneously serving as a grim reminder that they would likely bleed out on the sand the following afternoon. Number 5 is pork sausage, known as lucanica. The cooks tightly stuffed ground pork and heavy spices into intestinal casings and cooked them directly over an open fire. This preparation is the direct ancestor of the modern Italian sausage. Pork stood as the absolute most prized meat across all of Rome. Authorizing its distribution at the last feast demonstrated a rare gesture of generosity toward men preparing to perform in a theater of death. Number 4 is roast wild boar. This animal served as the centerpiece of the Cena Libera. The cook spit roasted a massive boar whole, presenting a true prestige food to the fighters. The trainers did not conduct this feast behind closed doors. They held it in a public space, allowing the crowds to enter and physically examine the fighters they would watch die the next day. The atmosphere mirrored the way modern Americans watch public weigh-ins before a heavyweight boxing match, inspecting the competitors like livestock. The historian Plutarch documented that not all the fighters gorged themselves on this incredible spread of food. Some men refused the roasted meat entirely. They chose instead to sit quietly and settle their family affairs, fully aware it was their last night alive. A gladiator could be chewing the best meal of his life while the man sitting across the table calculated exactly how to cut his throat the next morning. Number 3 is the ash drink. When modern American athletes finish a grueling workout, they consume brightly colored electrolyte drinks produced by a multi-billion-dollar sports supplement industry. The Roman gladiator reached for a cup of vinegar mixed with charred plant ash. While it sounds like a disgusting punishment, it functioned as a highly effective ancient sports recovery tonic. By drinking burnt ashes, the fighters flooded their bodies with the massive amounts of calcium required to heal microfractures in their bones. They constructed indestructible skeletal frames out of campfire garbage and acidic vinegar. Number 2 is the gladiator liver. At this stage, the dietary record shifts from brutal feeding to horrifying extraction. This item was not food the gladiators consumed, it was a compound manufactured from their corpses. Rooted in ancient Etruscan religious practices, the liver of a slain fighter was harvested directly from his body on the arenal floor. Ancient medical authors documented its consumption by citizens as a crude folk cure for epilepsy. This represented the ultimate, crushing dehumanization of the fighter. The empire owned their bodies so thoroughly that attendants ripped out their internal organs to be utilized as primitive medicine. Number 1 is gladiator blood. The most shocking consumption event in the Colosseum occurred while the fallen fighter's body was still warm. The historian Pliny the Elder documented with horror that spectators would rush down to the sand to drink the fresh blood of a slaughtered gladiator. They sucked the blood directly from the fatal wounds, classifying it as a draught of life meant to cure their physical ailment. The grim reality of the gladiator diet is that their final biological transaction was not meant for them. They were the transaction. The system commodified them so completely that the audience purchased their hot blood directly at the kill site as a medical product. These 25 meals never existed simply to provide cheap calories. They represent the physical scars of a captive class forced to swear a legal oath to endure being burned, bound, beaten, and killed by the sword. The diet demonstrates survival mechanics in their most raw and unforgiving form. The next time you consume a simple bowl of oatmeal or purchase an electrolyte drink, consider the men who ingested those exact nutrients, knowing they were walking into a slaughter. If you knew tomorrow was your last day on Earth, decide what you would choose for your final dinner.